When tragedy strikes in the world, it can be hard to hear, see, or even think about anything else. But when that starts to affect your mental health, where do you go from there? Let's take the Israel-Hamas war, for instance. Over the past few weeks, stories of sorrow have traveled from the Middle East, landing in our homes thousands of miles away. But as important as it is to stay up to date, psychologists say that doing so without any boundaries can lead to a condition called compassion fatigue.
Even if you're not directly experiencing the traumatic events, compassion fatigue can come from just hearing about and witnessing the traumatic events going on around you.
Compassion fatigue can also be seen as secondary trauma because the traumatic event is not happening to you directly. Dr. Kia Keating says that first responders, emergency room medics, and long-term caregivers often experience this kind of trauma. But social media has now completely flipped the script. For the first time in history, we are able to see first-hand accounts of suffering taking place all across our globe at any time and any place. And that kind of access can take its toll.
The research that we have on the kinds of repercussions that people have just from media exposure to violence and traumatic events is really significant and powerful in that it shows not only an immediate reaction and impact on their own mental health and well-being and health, but even long-term symptoms that occur even a few years later based on how much time they spent viewing media coverage of really traumatic events.
The most common symptoms include exhaustion, irritability, anger, and even depression. It's important to address these issues before it's too late. The best way to start is by taking a break. Stay off social media and away from the TV.
We want to be aware of what's going on in the world, but we also have to be somewhat protective of our own health and mental health.
Dr. Kia Keating points out that turning media off doesn't mean that you're turning your back on the issue. That guilt you may feel is completely normal, but instead realize that you're finding a way to recharge. And another helpful tip is to practice self-care. It can be as simple as a warm bath, a long walk, venting to a close friend, or even engaging in a fun activity. Psychologists say that implementing these practices can certainly help you deal with the heart-wrenching situations going on all across the world.